Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm thrilled today to have with us Robert Napolitano. Robert, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Jamie. Thanks for having me on here.
Absolutely. This is going to be a fun one. You are the founder of Grit Partners. I know you already told me you don't want to focus too much on title, but we're going to get into that and the kind of the meaning behind the name of your company, Grit Partners. But for the listener out there, take a minute or two and tell us who you are today and what you're up to.
So I've been in the mortgage banking industry and real estate industry for 20 plus years. I started as my own private lender. I've been through mortgage banking right into the great financial crisis that we had in 07, 08, and 09. I've since then moved from real estate investing to buying notes. I started my first private note fund in 2014. Currently winding that down, starting another iteration of that. And I also have another fund buying life settlements, but we'll get into how that interplays with the whole thing as well. But I've touched over $1 billion worth of debt, whether it be originating it, modifying it, buying it, trading it. I mean, I've been doing this for so long, and I know just about every part about this business. Love this business. I love the benefits it brings to myself, my investors, and the positive impact we have on homeowners out there as well. I don't think there's any other business like it that can, serve all three of those facets in a positive way.
Love it. Yeah, that's awesome. Those are a lot of you touched on some of the reasons I got into the note space as well. And I don't have as much experience on the mortgage side of things, but I did work for a mortgage broker and a title company back in the day. But the mortgage note space, as far as buying debt, residential debt, specifically, is a very niche space that I know some of our listeners are familiar with, but a lot of people, even who are familiar with real estate investing, have no idea what you're even talking about. But we'll get into that. So before we jump into your backstory, what does a typical week or month look like? Just briefly, give us a little bit more context about kind of your daily routine, if you will.
My daily routine. So I'm a father at first and foremost.
Nice.
We'll get into the part of that story as well. How you go through life stages, and I'm at a point in my life now where my time is my most valuable asset, and so my children are my priority. I shape my day, my business, my week around their needs, whether I'm bringing them to school in the morning, picking them up later in the day, doing activities with them. We just came back from a weekend in the Virginia mountains for a soccer tournament. So it was great to get away. Like, I still did some work, but it was nice to sit on the sideline of a soccer game, breathing the fresh air, reading a book, and doing some phone calls and taking care of some work in my, mobile outside office as well. So the freedom and the lifestyle options that we've accomplished are awesome. And so my day really gets dictated by the needs of the kids and providing a good life for them, because my number one duty is to be a good fiduciary of God's children that He's blessed me with.
I love it. And to the listener who may be thinking that Robert is blowing smoke and just wants to sound good, he's already given me a hard stop, because he has to go pick up his kids here shortly. So, he's not just saying that. So, Robert, the reason I reached out, I know we've crossed paths a couple times before, because we do run in similar circles. But the true reason I reached out to ask you to come on was I saw a post on LinkedIn that you'd put up, and talked about some of the hardship that you've been through, specifically financially. But obviously that crosses over into other aspects of your life, whether that's relationship, health, etc. Let's jump into your backstory. You can pick it up where you'd like, but the point here is to focus on adversity, particular type of adversity, or period of adversity that you've been through, and then we're going to pull out some lessons learned as we walk through chronologically back up to today. So, where would you like to start, Robert?
That's easy for me to start because I always go back down to my core. The people that know me know that I can be somewhat abrasive. That's one of the tenets of the name of Grit Partners, because I can be somewhat gritty, abrasive, and I really don't care type of attitude for what people think about me. So I'm going to tell everybody who's listening that I enjoy the F word, many F words, and I'm going to start with an F word that I embrace. I've learned to embrace, and it took me a long time to embrace. And the word is failure. One of my
Okay.
favorite F words is failure. And I've been through many of them, but I've learned over time that unless we embrace our failures, we're not going to be able to move forward. And what I've learned is that failures is nothing more than the mileposts that we use to measure success. Any successful entrepreneur, anybody that's been successful in anything, extremely successful, and you ask them how they did it, they're always going to tell you about how many times they failed. And so we measure our success in failure. So I don't subscribe to the mindset of, don't do things wrong. Don't take risks. Stay away from failure. No, no, no. It's okay to fail. Embrace it. Learn from it.
Sure. I love that.
In fact, there is in the Asian culture something they call kintsugi.
Okay.
Kintsugi, most people don't know this, but I'll give you the visual. Think of a porcelain vase shattered and then welded back together with gold. You've seen these items before, okay?
Sure.
And it's very valuable art. And what they've done is taken the broken item,
Sure,
and wielded it all back together with gold, and it creates a lot of value.
yeah.
And in a sense, that's who we are as humans as well. We are broken people. We screw a lot of things up. And unless we can meld those things back together that make us who we are, back together with gold, we're not going to find our true value. And so it always starts with our failures, because I've been at the top of the world and at the bottom of the world at the same time. And what I had at the top that I also had at the bottom is my failures. They follow me everywhere. But if you know how to embrace them and build upon them, then you can get anywhere you want.
Love
And
that.
so,
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of tweetable, there are a lot of quotes there, a lot that you just a lot of gold nuggets you just dropped. But that came out of somewhere. You didn't just read all that in a book.
No,
So
I didn't check, because it comes out of my core, and that's why. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story.
Yeah.
But the underlying driver behind there is embracing the failure. So I'm here. My parents, I'm Italian. I was born in New York, and my parents are off the boat Italian. They're speak broken English. Didn't finish high school. Came here to this country for a better life for their kids. And my father drove a bus in Manhattan, and my mother cut hair. Okay, we didn't have a lot of education. We didn't really have a lot of guidance growing up in the matters of business, and we had to learn pretty much what we learned from the streets. And in those times back in New York in late 70s, early 80s, and through the 80s, what was real in the news was everything about the mafia and the five families and all of that stuff. And so you kind of get your rules of how life happens, what you see and all around it. In fact, my family, as I understand it, my grandmother and her side of the family was part of one of those families, and they moved away from that element to the United States to break away from that element. So somewhere back in my roots, I'm tied to all that. Never knew any of them, but I guess it's cool. Just never knew any of them. You go back into those memories, remember seeing that distant uncle, cousin. Oh, now that makes sense now. When we saw
okay. Connecting some dots in hindsight. Yeah.
So they came from humble beginnings, and they became self-made millionaires buying real estate and the old school way of saving and working hard. I mean, after our soccer games on the weekends, we would have to go and cut the lawn on the multifamily that my parents had, or bring the hot water heater to the basement while my father try to do the welding and the sweating of the pipes himself and stuff. And so we learned as we went along. And I always wanted to do things like them, and they did well for themselves, but I always knew there was a better way of doing it. So, I learned how to do real estate through those traditional gurus. You pay your your fee, and you get your traditional education, and that's how most people get into this business.
Sure.
And I thought I was really good at it. I was good at it, and so I was, again, into '08 and '09. I ran my own mortgage company. I was driving around in a convertible Porsche, lending money, single. I was at the top of my game. And then I got hit by the great financial crisis, and it turns out that I sucked at real estate investing and what I was doing, because I had no idea what was going on. And so I actually lost everything, because I was actually robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I was, paying some of my mortgages with credit cards and it can't be happening to me. It can't be happening to me. And you're into this spiral, and it's just, it's crazy what goes through your mind and all the stresses that come. And I had no confidence, and I started getting depressed, and I didn't know if I was ever going to be successful again. And I got, buried in debt. Then the mortgage industry just, collapsed. I had no more income coming in. So how could I pay for any of this stuff?
So
And it
tell
was,
me I'm sorry,
yep,
before we jump into that, what was your real estate investing? I know you had your mortgage
yep,
brokerage, so you were
yep,
lending money and doing transactions that way, right?
yep.
But what was your investing? What was that, rental properties? What did that look like?
Yeah, a little bit of rental properties. I was doing some private lending,
Yeah,
and small fix and flips I was doing.
got
So
it.
I started where everybody else starts too, right? We all
Sure.
start either at wholesaling,
Yeah.
trying to make money in real estate without using your own money or credit, that type of thing.
Mhm.
I skipped over that part, and I started using my money, parents' money, friends and
Mhm.
family. Did some rentals. I saw how my parents were doing the rentals. They were
Sure.
doing it. Figure if they can do it, I can do it. So I
Sure.
did that. And I wanted to get into. I started. One of my mistakes was I started investing too early on, investing out of state and not in my backyard. I wanted to
Mhm.
be big quick,
I
so I
see.
wanted to go out of state, and I wasn't prepared for that.
Hmm.
So I lost the money, doing stuff in Arizona on the West Coast, and places that I wanted to be, but was there too early. And
So
so,
give us a little, like, from a personal standpoint. You already gave us some insight, but you know, how well were you doing? You don't have to get too specific if you don't want to, but how well were you doing? And
um,
then how hard was the crash for you?
I was, geez, I was probably just under making $1 million in net worth back then. Um, I had a couple of million worth of real estate, lending out on the street, only a couple $100,000 out on the street. And we were doing in loans, 40 million a month in loans we were doing in income. I mean, back then it was so easy, because, they were giving money away to everybody. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. I worked at a title company and then a mortgage brokerage after that. And it was, rates kept dropping, and it's like they can't go any lower, and then they did, and then everybody was refining.
and then you
And
got
like
into
you
the
said,
option arms. Remember the option
yeah,
arms, the
yeah,
the
absolutely.
pick a pay? Yeah.
Absolutely. There was, I mean, just if you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. So it was pretty easy to.
Yeah. It was good. It was
um,
good money back then. It was easy money back then.
sure. So we head into then 08, 09, the crash happens.
Yep.
Sounds like you're overexposed from a
Yep.
debt standpoint, and like you said, robbing
Yeah.
Peter to pay Paul, and then take it from there.
So I had a couple of things happening at that time. So I had just in '01, I just gotten out of my first marriage.
Okay.
Uh, and so going into that, I'd been dating it for a while and stuff and everything. And so I had just at that time been dating my now wife, my girlfriend back then, for a couple of years.
Hmm.
And I figured I was back on I'm making money,
Hmm.
got a good woman next to me. Things are going well. And then all of a sudden that rug got taken out from under me. So I had one good thing going for me and a lot of
Sure.
things going bad for me. And so I was trying to keep it all together,
Hmm.
ego, type A personality,
Hmm.
denial. I can pull this myself out of this. You can't tell me I'm wrong. I do this. But
Hmm.
in the end, you know, couldn't get it done. And then it's hard for me to swallow my pride, because I didn't want to disappoint her. I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I didn't want to disappoint anybody. But I didn't want to look like that loser. But I couldn't do it. And I was labeled as a deadbeat. So I struggled, man. I couldn't pay my bills. And then my last two properties, I was selling stuff off to pay things off, and my last two properties went into foreclosure. And so Listen, I remember this distinctly. I'll always remember this, that we were in my condo on the water. Um, we were engaged at the time. Yeah, we were engaged at the time, and she wanted to help me to pay some of my bills and trying to help me to get organized. She saw that I was struggling, and I just lost it on her. And I just went off on her to the point where I'll never forget this vividly. I started making her cry.
Hmm.
Her bottom lip started trembling, and she said, crying to me, "All I'm trying to do is help you."
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, it killed me. I was so ashamed of myself. That was my bottom right there. That was my bottom. And I was saying to myself that if I screw this up with her, then
Yeah.
it doesn't get worse than that.
Right. You've already
Yeah.
lost one relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
and and now you're dealing with the financial side, which is
Yep.
incredibly stressful. But
Yeah.
like I said, it often we find that guests on the show and really everyone deals with some level of health, relationship, and financial adversity. And they're not isolated, right? So the financial
Nope.
stuff bleeds over into the relationship and vice versa.
Yeah.
Um,
So what I learned in my divorce was when we went to counseling before one of that relationships fail for one of three reasons: money, communication, or sex. One of those
hmm,
three things. They all tie into,
sure,
and money just bleeds into the emotional side of it, the mental side of it. It's all tied together, all of
sure,
it. And so
absolutely,
having that health physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually is
yeah,
totally important. Totally important.
absolutely. So she offers to help. You don't take kindly to it. You uh,
Yep.
don't respond in a way that you're proud of now, right? And that's your rock bottom. So what happens after that?
Well, and I made the realization that not only do I suck in real estate, but I sucked as a man.
Hmm,
I was broken at that point. So I had to do so. That's my decision. That's when I was like, okay, I wasn't getting any worse from here. Okay. And that's what I talked about before. That in the end, when you have nothing but your failures,
mm,
you embrace them and you start picking up the pieces, start
mhm,
getting that gold and start putting it back together.
mhm,
She was my gold. I was the broken one. Let's start putting stuff together. And
mm,
so you acquiesce. I'm at the bottom. Where do we build from here?
mhm,
And we went forward to get engaged and get married. And I actually filed for bankruptcy 2 days before we got married.
hmm. Okay.
Um, but I had that fight in me saying that. And
Yeah.
at that time, so what I was doing at that time, I gotta give you a little bit of context. So what I was doing to try to make money, being that I knew the banking industry, and if you remember back then, there was a lot of improper foreclosures going on and a lot of
Mm,
things where the banks didn't have the notes, the MERS debacle, the robo signing,
mm,
all this stuff going on. And so
mhm,
I had a lot of knowledge on how that works. So I actually started a litigation support company doing foreclosure defense in New York and New Jersey.
hmm,
And so I was hired as a banking expert. I did expert reports, mortgage audits.
hmm.
I actually have and was credited with an amicus brief in the state Supreme Court of Massachusetts.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so I'm in the record books and up there as being
Huh.
an expert on this stuff. And so I was doing okay. We were making some money. It wasn't like the money I was making before, but I was helping people stay in homes, stopping some illegal
Sure.
foreclosures. I started educating attorneys on how this works. And so it wasn't enough to keep up with everything. And so I did the bankruptcy 2 days before I got married because I didn't know if my bankruptcy was going to affect her good credit,
Mm,
her good job, and all that stuff and everything. So I said, you know what, let me just put the firewall here and I'll go into BK. So we did a chapter 13 where we're going to try and restructure everything. And
mhm,
I've got one of my attorneys. I told them what was going on inside of the bankruptcy with my last two creditors, with two of the too big to fail banks, the big institutions.
mhm,
And I said, let's fight them because, there's a lot of stuff going on here. I'm a fighter. Let's go create adversarial proceedings. And we did.
hmm,
And so I had two lawsuits inside of my bankruptcy going on. And I'll
hmm,
keep the story short because it's all documented on public record. But I ended up beating the banks to the point where the banks settled with me and paid my entire bankruptcy estate, paid all of my creditors, paid all of my attorney's bills. And I walked away with a nice big check out of my bankruptcy. And I started my note fund with that because I went through that and it was such a nasty, nasty, nasty experience.
mhm,
And I said, people need to be treated better this way. What these banks are doing, it is just so, nefarious. It is just, it's terrible what they put people through. And I wanted to do it better. and I saw how they were trading notes and how the mortgage backside worked and all this stuff worked. And I said, I can get into this business. I know this
Mm,
business. Went to law school to become a paralegal back then too. I said I wanted to
mm.
learn the legal system and how this works, because a lot of this happens inside of the legal system, and so I did.
Yeah. So,
My second,
so you took, I mean, you obviously took your strength and your experience, that your expertise, right? And you applied that, and then you took your own pain that you had felt and experienced through this, and that was some of that was those two elements were some of the gold that you're talking about, and
yeah,
to put these pieces back together and start rebuilding. So for the listener, you're talking about you were getting foreclosed upon, right?
yep.
By these banks. So, I deal in the non-performing note space. We do foreclosures. And so kind of briefly compare and contrast what should a foreclosure have looked like, and what were these banks actually doing?
So that's a great question, because I see both sides of it. Um, and it's unfortunate because I like to help people where I can, but
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to help everybody.
no,
So
that's true.
what I've reconciled in my head and my heart is that I'll do everything that I can as the note owner
Hmm.
to help people stay in their homes,
Sure.
modify the payments, make it very affordable. I can take, we get very creative in how we do some of the stuff.
Yeah.
I could take no payments and keep people in homes and still be profitable,
Mm-hmm.
if it makes sense. But the one thing I can't do, never
Mm-hmm.
could bring to the table, is the income. If they can go and provide an income on the other
Mm-hmm.
side of the table,
Mm-hmm.
I can work with them. I can take care of the rest. But I could not provide the income. And so when we did a lot of the foreclosure defense, I was
Mm-hmm.
there to help because the banks were illegally foreclosing, do the proper procedure and stuff.
Got it.
But then you see people take advantage of the system as well. And I saw the ugly side of that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so I see this side of it too. That's not why I'm here, to help you take advantage of the system.
Sure.
So it's good to know they are out there too. And
Yeah.
so you try to pick and choose who you
Yeah.
can help. And it comes down to the income, who's being open and honest. Look, I want to stay in the house, but I want to be accountable and I want to make payments. Great.
Yeah.
Happy to work with you.
Yeah. On previous podcasts, previous episodes as well as previous podcasts, I've, talked about this as far as just, it's almost like parenting. It's like you can only do so much. I mean, you have play a large role in influencing your child's behavior and their decision making and things. But at the end of the day, if there's no communication, there's no effort, or there's no ability on the borrower's part to, like you said, have income and make these payments, there's only so much you can do. So yeah, you
Correct.
you have people taking advantage on both sides of it. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. And like you, we're not out to foreclose. That is not our intent. We do try as best as possible to keep everyone in their home. At the end of the day, that property is the collateral, on that debt though, and that's your recourse compared to buying stocks and things like that. But that's for another episode.
Yeah,
So.
well, let me say something about that though, because you're right, because I agree with you. So my foreclosure is my last thing that I want to do, but for a different reason though. See, when I was doing what I learned was when I was doing the mortgage banking
Mhm.
and doing well, you get paid on a transactional basis. And I used to say back then, you know, you're only as your net worth was your pipeline. And even
Mhm.
that, some deals didn't close, your pipeline wasn't really worth much.
Mhm.
But the day you close is the poorest day of your life, because looking forward, you got no paycheck coming. You got to work for the next one and chase the next nickel. And so
Sure.
you're always chasing the next closing, chasing the next closing, and chasing the next closing until that pipeline closes and the rugs get pulled out from under you. So from there, at that moment, I never wanted to get back into a business where my check and my income was dependent upon a pipeline or transactional based. So going
Mhm.
into these loans and modifying is my biggest priority, because
Mm.
once you do and modify the loan, I now
Yeah.
get paid with no effort. I
Sure.
get
That
paid
makes.
with no effort. And so that passive
Yeah.
income, that
Yeah.
mailbox money, is what I want to do to build. So I don't want to foreclose,
Yeah.
not because not the best thing to do anyway. I want to build my portfolio more and more and more of this
Sure.
passive income coming in, because
Yeah.
I was in that spot where it was reliant upon me to go to work every day, and
Sure.
got
Flipping
burned
or
by that.
rehab, flipping, wholesaling, or
That's right.
brokering. it's transactional. And but that so this change in your approach to your business is what has now allowed you to go to the mountains in Virginia,
Yes,
work a little bit here and there, but it's
yes,
more and more passive as time goes on because you're being intentional about that. So I love that.
yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I
Um,
know you make the money go to work and the
yeah,
dollars go to work so that you can recapture your time.
sure.
It's a different
Absolutely.
mindset.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've had some big wins in our NPL fund, our non-performing loan fund, but then what? Like you
Right.
said, it now I got to do it again. I got to put this money to work. There's a
That's
lot of
right.
pressure, a lot of work um, associated with that. So pick it up. How's the story continue from there?
Where did I leave off? That I was in the so one of the other things the second property inside the bankruptcy actually got foreclosed on. And
Okay.
so we ended up going to get that foreclosure undone. And that was a big
Mm.
mess because the bank at that point had already sold it to another family at that point.
Wow, they had sold the
Yeah,
property.
it was
I actually just did this myself for the first time. Was I undid a foreclosure last month, but I'll save that. So
it's
they
a big
tried to
deal.
do that. Yeah. So they tried to do that, but they couldn't, you're saying, because the
So they did
property
foreclose. They
they
did
did the for
foreclose. They did sell it to somebody else. And
Yep.
so at that point, our lawsuit continued, and
Hmm.
we had to get it on my. And again, they decided to settle with me because they knew I held all the cards and I didn't hold
Mm.
out. What's even more interesting that we had such a big settlement with that my attorney turned on me, and he wanted to get
Really?
paid more. So it's amazing how
Mm.
nobody believes you can do any of this stuff, and all of a sudden it shows up magically because you have the drive and the grit to do
Yeah.
this, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden everybody wants to
Well,
take a bite out of you.
all of a sudden they were in your corner the whole time, right?
All of the whole time, exactly.
I
So
was with you.
I had to go to a fee arbitration with my attorney for another year and
Wow.
argue over my settlement and how much he was going to get out of it, and I won that as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's
Wow.
been it's been a long journey. So after that, got married and went through all this in the course of those years. But here's what I found. I found that, we were blessed enough with the birth of my first child came a couple
Hmm.
months after we were married.
Hmm.
And I got a picture somewhere. They'll be posted on LinkedIn as well. I got a picture. Someone took me the first day that my daughter was born, and me nose to nose with her. And that's when I made my promise. That's what changed me, that it wasn't about me anymore. Now
Mm.
it's about, being that responsible person for somebody else's life. And that's
Sure.
when I had my renewed faith with God and in myself, because God doesn't think I'm a deadbeat. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given this responsibility to me. He
Mm.
actually thought I was worth something and say, hey, you know what? I think you can take care of my child. And that's a
Mm.
big responsibility for me I take very seriously. And
Sure.
so that's been another foundation. So you take your failures and then your faith in yourself and then your faith in God that gives you your fortitude, your focus, that brings you to a good family, to have some fun, and you can work the finances on top of it, and that helps you become a great fiduciary for other people's money. Told you I like those F words.
Yeah, it's a lot of F words. That's awesome. I love it. So, okay, so you've got children and you've got a family that's growing, and what is your take us up through today? I know there's a lot of ups and downs, but from the birth of your daughter through today, what did things look like?
So building my fund, a $25 million fund. Um, we raised most of that. We got almost to our goal of 25 million. And
This was 2014, 2015, you
so we
said?
started in 2014 is when we started.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So I got out of the bankruptcy. We finally closed out the bankruptcy in 2012, 2013, right around there. We finished that up. And so I took my settlement and then, started the real estate note fund at that point.
So at that point, when you just curious, because I have a couple funds, but I've only been doing it for a couple years as far as the funds go. You had already had a lot of exposure to that, or at least that world in general,
To
right?
the fund side?
Well, at least seeing people with funds, or I guess my question
No.
really, okay. So how did you decide to start a fund, and who did you model? How did you learn? What it's
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
a big thing to just start off with in the note space.
So I think I try. So look, I try to look for signs that God sends me. And all of a sudden, at that moment in time, the Jobs Act had come out, and everybody wanted to
Mm.
do this thing on the
Hmm.
fund. So he dangles this in front of me, going with my ego, saying, "You want to deal with fund manager? You want to be a fund manager?" Well, the stuff was going on. Like, oh, this sounds cool. Why not? So, being the risk taker that I am, embrace your fails. After what I just been through, I could use a break and go get to another screw up deal. So let's go try doing it. So what's the big
Nice.
deal?
I
So
love it.
I don't. Why not try? Why not? So I went. I don't know how I found them. I found an advisor at that point. There was a group who was helping emerging managers put their fund together, do training on it, and then they were also um, uh, uh, put you on a stage in front of accredited investors, and you can
Mm.
pitch your deal and get your first money in. And so I did that whole thing,
Hmm.
got some money out of that, and then moved on and started raising money ever since. And it grows from there. So I started with my own money, friends and family.
Yep.
Um, and it's scary. It's especially when it's not your money and other people's money.
Sure.
Uh, it's scary because you don't want to screw it up, even though
Absolutely.
we're nothing but a bunch of screw ups. We hope that people don't look at our flaws, even though we are all flawed. Um, but I knew enough in the business, and I've been through enough of the battlefield. I mean,
Hmm.
going through what I went through on the legal side, I felt strong enough that what really could happen to me that's worse than that. So
Sure.
I felt that I was prepared for
Got it.
worst case scenarios. And so, at that point back then, I said going into this and building back up again, I didn't want to just play offense. I want to play offense and defense
Mm.
simultaneously. And so that was different. And one thing that I did, so I always had it back in my head when I started my fund, that coming out of the bankruptcy, one thing that I saw that I was always amazed with was how these banks put these mortgage-backed securities together, and they had this thing called a credit default swap, which ultimately acts like an insurance policy. That any
Mm.
risk that they take, the insurance policy covers it. And I said,
Hmm.
coming out into doing our fund, what's out there like that can help me and cover my
Mm.
screw ups and pay when I
Hmm.
screw it up? There's nothing out there of an
Hmm.
insurance policy. So if I'm going to have other people come into my fund and I know that I'm a little bit of a screw up, how do I protect them if I get the screw up? There's nothing out there. So I was always on the search for that. And so that's where my life settlement fund comes in, where we started a couple
Okay.
of years ago. So our life settlement fund that we put together acts as our insurance to help take on some of the risks that we do on the distressed real estate side.
So,
So
and obviously we're not going to have time to get into too many of the weeds on that, but that's entirely separate. I mean, the two things are
yes,
entirely separate, right? But
yeah.
from
Well,
a,
it all comes under the brand of Grit Partners.
got it.
It's one of our offerings that we do the non-performing notes, the private
Yeah.
lending, and then the life settlements as a suite of offerings, and so
Okay.
it becomes safer that way. So going back
Got it.
to when I was given my children and to be responsible for them, it kind of
Yeah.
bled into my investor as well. How do we play it safe for them too? Because we want nothing to happen to them and their money.
Got it.
Um,
I see.
so it was always
A
keeping
couple,
focused on doing that.
a couple of quick. So first, did the bankruptcy in your history have any? It sounds like you were able to raise a lot of money pretty quickly. So did that become a problem from an investor standpoint? Did anybody ask you about that?
So I have to disclose it, which I did in my
Sure.
PPM. So it was always disclosed in my PPM.
Sure.
In fact, the attorney that did my documents, since he had to write it all up, I had to tell him the whole story. He was
Mm.
so impressed. He helped raise some money. Uh,
Nice.
so he goes,
Well,
30 years I've been doing this. I've never heard of such a story.
yeah, the fact that
I
you were
gave
able
him.
to fight back and win, right, and get that settlement, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean the fact, like you said, everyone's a screw up. I mean, there's risk in every investment, right? And so, as an investor, passive investor, I might say, well, Robert has been through hell and back. I trust no one more than him because he's been there, right? Whereas, somebody else who hasn't been there, we don't know how they would handle it.
I
Um,
totally agree. That's absolutely right. That when people ask, about your wins, I'm like, nah, I want to know about your losses. Tell me what you lost
yeah,
and what you did. So it's not about avoiding risk. It's about
sure,
how do you handle and mitigate the risk. The risk is
sure.
there.
Sure, absolutely.
And so how do you handle it? How do you manage it? And I think that's the better question for
Sure.
investors,
Yeah,
as you said.
absolutely. And then the second question, the life settlement part of it. Again, I personally, love to spend a whole episode on that. But what is that? Just high level, what does that look like for an investor? What is that?
And so it's similar to buying non-performing notes. I actually call it the
Mhm.
cousin of NPLs because you're still buying paper, you're still buying a future payment, you're buying it
Mhm.
at today's value and today's discount. The difference is, the trigger events. Upon
Mhm.
the maturity of the policy, you get paid a large sum of money as long as you
Mhm.
keep the monthly payments going. And so it's a simple mathematical equation how to do all that.
Mhm.
And so with very little overhead,
Mhm.
honestly, it monetizes time, and so it acts
Mhm.
as a great hedge and what we call the shock absorber of all the risk. It absorbs a lot of risk with very little overhead.
So these
Uh,
are life insurance policies where the person, the policy expires before the person does.
no, no,
Or
no, no. So it goes like so. No, so let me give you an example. So there's many of these policies out there that people use for estate planning. Let's say
okay.
for generational wealth transfer, where the policy is still a valid policy, but they get
Mhm.
abandoned. So we look for these abandoned policies. There's
Okay.
in policies. If there's a company that goes into a bankruptcy or becomes insolvent, these policies are assets and they can be sold and abandoned and bought at a big discount.
Got it.
And so you continue to make the payments on these policies,
Yeah,
and they become very, very, very valuable.
I see.
Pick them up at a big discount.
Right.
So
But these are whole life policies because
yeah,
they have cash value. Got it.
yes.
Understood. Okay. See, I learned things along the way too. But yeah, okay, got it. So you've got three primary kind of offerings within Grit Partners. Um, Talk to us a little bit more about Grit Partners. Why is it called Grit Partners? And again, just what does the business look like?
Yeah. So again, Grit Partners is just our branding piece that we have the three verticals: the distress side, the private lending, and the life settlements. And so we don't really do much on the private lending. We do private lending where it helps one of our internal deals, whether it be on the distressed real estate side or the life settlement side. We don't make it a primary core business. There's so much of it going on out there. There's so
Mhm.
much competition. There's better ways of making money, deploying capital, in my opinion, but we have
Mhm.
it. But it's, as we need it, we'll put it out there and
Got it.
do it. But the distress side, like I said, we're winding down fund one. We're going to be starting
Mhm.
up fund two. That's a little over 7 years now where we've had that. So we're going to wind that down. And we do that for a number of reasons, some of which is to, gentrify some of our capital stack and send some people along their way. Um, we wish you
Got
could
it.
do that with other people in your lives, but at least with your investor base, you can do some of that. And
Sure.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
sorry.
So speaking of you said I think you alluded to the fact that you're going to start a new fund, or you're in the process. What do you foresee just in general? I know no one has a crystal ball. We're not looking
Yeah, no,
for
of course, yeah.
market predictions, but how are you changing your business based on market conditions and what you see in the future?
So I'm doing a couple of things. I personally think we're about to see from the distressed note space. I probably think we're going to see some of the best opportunities we'll see in our lifetime. I think that we're going to, and it's not hard to conclude some of this looking
Mhm.
at where we are in the world with our leadership, where we are on a global stage, on a domestic stage. You know, our leadership has taken us down some pretty chaotic
Mhm.
paths. And with that creates a lot of uncertainty, a lot of distress. I think you're going to see a lot more bank failures, commercial real estate failures, which are going to
Mhm.
lead to, unfortunately, a lot of job loss, more loss in the stock market, and more opportunity for these distressed assets to come onto the marketplace, where we'll be
Mhm.
able to pick them up at bigger discounts. I
Mhm.
think this industry and participants like you and I will
Mhm.
become more and more valuable
Mhm.
because of the deleveraging process that we become a part of. And being a part of this deleveraging process for people and the homeowners is so important. And doing it in the manner in which we do is of great importance.
Hmm.
I think there's gonna be less people doing this and more opportunity for us to grab our piece.
Hmm.
And I think that the best days for this business are just ahead of us and not that far ahead of
Hmm.
us. I've been doing some advising, being a paid advisor for some younger groups who want to get
Hmm.
into this business and graduate from the traditional real estate investing. And so I've been taking some positions in their management company as well.
Mm.
So I'm doing a couple of things where I'm still staying active, but at the same time, becoming more passive
Hmm.
as an LP as well at
Mm.
the same time. I think I can create my own portfolio and help others to build their portfolios at the same time and have a greater reach. And that's what I'm trying to do now is a little bit of both. And then, you know, the life settlements will go across all sorts of asset classes that I can put out there as well. So
Mm.
I'm doing my part to really scale Grit
Hmm.
Partners
Right.
in what I think is going to be a huge windfall for this industry. And it's needed because, you
Yeah.
know, putting out a lot of these fires, we need a lot of firefighters, and that's what we are. And there's not enough of us out there.
You can't just artificially prop things up for forever.
But forever, they can't. At some point,
And now, you don't mess with the commercial debt space? Is it all residential?
I do mostly residential. I don't really touch commercial.
Hmm. Yeah. Well,
They are different beasts. They're not different
sure.
beasts. I just, you know, I'm so busy on the one side. I have no need or desire to go to that side with the
Hmm.
learning curve that's there. I just no desire to. I
Yeah.
could, but
No,
yeah, a
I'm
lot
with you.
going on.
I stick with what I know, and I've got plenty
Exactly.
plenty to do already. So,
Exactly.
um,
There's plenty to do on this side.
yeah. Awesome. Well, I've got some rapid fire questions here.
Sure.
If you're ready,
Of
I
course.
think you're ready. Robert, what's one thing that people misunderstand about you?
About me?
Yeah,
Oof.
you personally.
Um, that's a good question. You know, they say that a jar can't read its own label, and you're asking me to read my own label.
I
That's a good question. So no
love
matter
that.
what I say, I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to. So I do have a. I do when I'm in the public and out in work and business mode. I do
Mhm.
have more of a tight collared stickler and
Mm.
abrasive side to me, more businesslike. But
Mhm.
behind that, I'm the biggest kid you'll ever meet. My kids and I think I'm a bigger kid than they are. And it's imperative for us to have a laughter in this house, and we wake up to laughter every morning. But I don't show that out in public as much. So that's one thing I
Nice.
guess people can misunderstand
Sure.
about me.
So you have forced family fun? No, I'm just kidding. No, I
It's the
like
other
that.
way
That's
around.
awesome.
It's forced
Forced. Yeah,
business.
yeah, 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 yeah. Got it. Forced seriousness on the business side.
Yes.
Um, we already talked about your failures and embracing them. Um, is there anything you want to add there as far as just lessons learned from embracing your failures?
Um, I wish everybody a successful failure. That's what I wish to everybody. Because for
Nice.
failures don't have to stay as failures. There are successes if you
Hmm.
look beyond them.
Sure.
Um,
So don't let it go to
and
waste.
you don't let it go to waste. You need to look through these roadblocks and this adversity to see the solution on the other side. As long as you can keep moving forward, you will get to the other side
Love it.
always.
So this might be ties right into the next question. But if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would that be?
To learn quicker, I've learned the lesson, but I wish I would have done it sooner, is not to be that kinetic learner. If you tell me that pot is hot, I still got to touch it and still get burnt. If you tell me that, you know, because, or if I can see the smoke and the steam coming off the boiling water that I shouldn't touch, I'm still going to touch it. So, but I've learned that later on to learn from other people's mistakes. I just wish I would have learned that sooner.
Got it. That's a good answer. If you were given $10 million tomorrow, what would you do with it? So not for an investment, not from an investor for your fund, but just somebody writes you a check. What would you do with it?
20% of it I'm giving away, 40% of it I'm investing, and 40% of it I'm spending with the family.
Nice. Awesome. What's one challenge that you're facing in your business right now?
So interesting. The challenge that I'm currently facing is, I think, a challenge that everybody is facing. That since we're on the back end of a pandemic now, the
Mm,
way the world operates and does business
mm,
has changed. And a lot, just
sure.
like we're having this
Yeah.
meeting now in
Yeah.
digital, on the digital platforms. So coming from, a business that I've done for 20 something years, where I would shake
Hmm.
hands and look people in the eye,
Hmm.
and get to know them as a character before
Yeah.
I did business with them, learning how to do that and showing. So this is how you got me to, because I'm being forced to show my vulnerabilities on LinkedIn, which was tough for me. Not so much to tell the story, but getting the LinkedIn stuff going and getting the marketing going, and now integrating social media and social platforms into my business to go along with my messaging of what it is that we're doing is my biggest challenge. I'm getting there. We're
Mm,
making forward progress, obviously, since we're here talking about it now and
sure.
it's starting to work. But that's my biggest challenge. And I think a lot of people face that now, that,
Sure.
dealing with the new technology and doing business in a social environment is a little bit of an uphill battle.
Wonder how that has affected the mob and their operations. I'm just kidding. You don't have to respond to that one. Um,
It's funny.
let's see. What's one occupation that you'd like to try that's entirely off the wall, totally separate from what you actually do?
An occupation that I like to try. Well, these are good questions. Um, Honestly, when I think about stuff like that, I like going to uh, very occupations or roles that don't get enough attention or credit. So, back in the day when they were collecting tolls on the bridge, I'd go be a toll collector,
Mm, okay.
because you get
Nice.
to meet people and just greet people, and they're on their way, and you're just
Yeah, I
watching
like
life
it.
go by.
Nice. No one's answered like that before, so that was original. Um, how about a book that you can recommend for a listener out there? Could be on, failure or business or whatever you'd like.
So I have a couple of them that I'm reading.
Okay.
Um, not they're outside on my deck that I have all of them, but the one that I always go back to is Think and Grow Rich is always a great one. That's a
Sure.
popular one.
Absolutely.
From the sales side, there's a book called Tell to Win is a great book.
Mm,
Um, um, I'm reading one now called Persuasion, by
okay.
Cialdini, Dr.
Okay.
Cialdini, I think is called his name. He's big
Never heard of
on
it. Yeah.
um, Ray Dalio's Principles,
Mm, yep. Those are
um, The Banker's Code by George Antone. He's got the Banker's Code, the Millionaire Debt, and the Wealth Code.
awesome. Those are,
Um,
I think, five really good ones. So nice. Um, Robert, how do you like to serve others? Put you on the spot here.
It's a good question. Um, it's a good question. If I gave you an answer, it wouldn't be a real answer, because the first thing I'd need to know is the person I'm talking to. How can
Mm,
I serve them?
mm,
If I had a one size
sure.
fits all, then it wouldn't be authentic.
Okay. I love that. So I would say by listening
Yeah. Oh,
first,
good.
right?
Perfect answer. Yes. So by
But
listening, there you go. There's my
yeah.
answer. By listening.
Uh,
Yes.
so
Thank you.
that's no, that's really good. Um, have I missed anything? What should we cover before we get out of here?
Oh my goodness. So how did I start playing guitar? I
Do
can't
it.
read
Let's do
music.
it.
I can't
Okay.
read music. So I play by ear.
That's
Um,
awesome.
my guitar is like it's like my pet, that my guitar was always there for me in my darkest days, always there to help soothe me, always there to help cleanse me emotionally. I mean, there were plenty of times that I was, moving, whether it be I lost my place, got out of a relationship, divorce, is that my guitar always had the front seat with me, because that was my best friend. That's been replaced for the last 14 years now. Actually longer than that. We're married for 14, together another 4 years. So
So
um,
you let her sit up front. You don't make her sit in
yes.
the back.
Well,
Okay.
and now the kids fight who sits up front now. So I'm lucky enough to have two kids and the wife, and then the car. That's why the guitar stands up on the wall now,
Yeah.
because that's where it ends up, which is fine. But it's taken me, bridged me long enough to get to, where we're fighting over the front seats now. But
Awesome.
I'll tell you how I learned. In high
Yeah.
school, a buddy of mine, very popular kid, and Joe Cavallo, his name, was a very good guitar player. Had an illness, didn't come to school for a month. I went to go visit him at his house, and when I got there, the mom started crying, saying, "You're the only one that's come to visit him." I said, "Really? But he's so popular. There's no one, and he's so depressed that he thinks everybody forgot about him, and he's in the basement." So I went in the basement, and he had his guitar on his shoulder. He was a really good guitarist. I
Mm.
was like, "Oh, that's cool." And he's like, "Oh, you want to try?" I was like, sure, put it on my shoulder. And at that point, it's like he crowned me. That was his best and only friend in the basement that was with him through this hard time. And he showed me a
Wow.
C chord, and I played a C chord. And then from there, I was hooked. I went home, listened to my Bon Jovi records. I had a little broken guitar in my closet with two strings that were out of tune. And I played just on the strings, trying to be, Bon Jovi and all the 80s rockers back then. And I tuned my ear, and now I can pick up a song and play, but not
Playing
very
guitar.
well. I can still play, and it
That's
still serves its purpose.
that's a really cool story. Yeah, I can tell it. Everything has a purpose. You obviously, I mean, you have a lot of intention in the background for those watching on YouTube, and you obviously take a lot of you're very intentional with your life. I love that. So, last question. Well, second to last question. What does we talked about some of the financial hardship you've been through, and again, not trying to pry too much, but what does financial abundance look like today for you, and what does it mean to you?
So I actually was so part of my advising is I do some training, and I was on actually one of my sessions and modules today, and we talked about that. And it goes right back to what you see here: invest for freedom. Freedom. That's what everybody wants. When you
Mhm.
move up the scales of society, the economic scale of society, and moving up that economic ladder, it's because you want more freedom of choice, more freedom of movement, more freedom of speech, more lifestyle options, more freedom of where we're buying our essentials every day, more freedom of where we live, more freedom of when we want to go on vacation, more freedom, and have, get released from this debt prison that we're in, these
Mhm.
emotional prisons that we're in, these mental prisons that we're in.
Mhm.
Everything on TV today is there to fear monger and saber rattling to scare everybody into submission.
Mhm.
And so all of our freedoms on every level is being attacked. And so what financially success means is the
Mhm.
more you can rise above that,
Mhm.
the more freedoms that you have, that's when you're financially successful, is the more freedom that you have. And that's it, going back to, that's why I love this business too,
Mhm.
because the more you can put your money to work
Mhm.
and free up your time, the
Sure.
more financially free you've become.
Yeah, I
So
love
I
it.
look at it not so much as a dollar amount, but how much time you have to do what it is that you want by choice.
Sure. Well, you already said it. Your time is your most valuable asset, most valuable resource, which I normally say at the end of every episode. I may have borrowed that from another podcast host, but it's so true though. It really is. So you can't replace it, right? You can't replace time. So Robert, man, this has been awesome. You've been vulnerable and, talked about embracing your failure you've got a very inspirational story. So thank you so much.
Appreciate that.
Where can our listeners find you online?
Oh, so I have a presence only really on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, you can, search for The Real Rob Knapp. And you'll find my profile, connect with me there. And we're also pushing forth this concept of capturing tomorrow, where we want people to look forward, look towards the abundance of the future, look towards the next generations, and taking what time we have today to capture abundance for our future and our children tomorrow. So Capturing Tomorrow, people can email me at brilliant@capturingtomorrow.com, because we want everybody to be brilliant at capturing their tomorrow. So brilliant@capturingtomorrow.com. That's their first affirmation of doing so, is by writing it with their fingers. They want to become brilliant at capturing tomorrow.
Awesome. And your company website is grittrust.com?
GRItrust.com.
GRI
Yes.
Trust. Got it. 1T. Well, 2 T's total.
Awesome.
Awesome.
1T on the website. Yes.
1T
GRI
and then
Trust.
the end of trust. But
Yes.
Robert, thanks a ton, man. This has been fantastic. I know our listeners are going to get a ton of value from this. So really appreciate you taking the time.
Anytime, Jamie. I appreciate you inviting me on here. I really appreciate it.
I know you got to go pick up your kids, so we'll get out of here. And thanks to the listener out there for spending your most valuable resource with us, and that is your time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.